Okay. So Chuck and I talked about it and decided that I will go first. I'm Linda Reinen. In terms of the spectrum of student organizations, Pomona College has a very informal student group. There's no name, there's no formal funding, things like that. So I'm starting with the one end of the spectrum. And so I'm going to be talking about the student group activities that we do at Pomona College and how that builds community. And I want to thank Pranoti and the others for inviting us, for inviting me to talk about this, because I'm really proud of my students and what they do. Before we start out, I'm going to just talk about a little bit about the school, about Pomona College, sort of its setting, how it fits in the educational community here, the geology department, and then talk about our student group activities. And I'm going to finish up by talking about some comments that I got from our students about why they feel the student group is so close. So to prepare for this talk, I actually met with several of our students and asked them what they thought helped contribute to our community. So if I could have the next slide. Excellent. All right, so Pomona College, we're a four-year liberal arts college, so we have undergraduates only. There's about 1,500 students at the school, but we're part of the Claremont Consortium, which is 5 undergraduate colleges, 2 graduate colleges, and there's about 5,000 undergraduates all told. If students want to major in geology, they do so at Pomona College. So our department is made up with students from all 5 of the undergraduate colleges in the Claremont Consortium. And as you, Pomona College is in Southern California, right next to the San Andreas Fault, which is exciting as a geologist and a little less so as a homeowner. But we have lots of great field trip locations, so you can imagine that we spend a lot of time going to the coast and mountains and desert and active tectonics. Next, Chris. The geology department, we're pretty small. We're about 4 FTE, at a little bit more than 4 FTE. As I said, we have students from all 5 of the consortium colleges. Our department, we have about 6 to 12 seniors per year, and we have both majors and minors. Most of our students major in the straight geology track, although we do have some students who take one of the other 2 tracks, which emphasize a little bit more in biology and chemistry for the environmental or science track, or physics and astronomy if they do the earth, planetary, and space science. But the majority of our students are majors and in the geology track. Students who start out as minors tend to switch into majors, and so we don't have very many geology minors. There are also ways to major with a heavy geology component through other programs. There's a geochemistry track in chemistry, public policy, and environmental analysis. And as a result, well, we're cut off on the bottom there, but as a result, we have very strong connections with other departments, and that's primarily chemistry, physics, and math. So we have a lot of students who double major in physics and math, physics and geology, or math and geology. Next slide. The other thing that's really important in our department is in the last several years, probably about the last 5 to 10 years, we've had a significant increase in the number of students who are doing a study abroad. And most students do it in the second semester of their junior year. The majority of our students go to New Zealand as part of the Frontiers Abroad program, where they can do both field camp and the semester abroad. The rest of our students mostly go to South Africa. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that a number of our students go as a group to New Zealand. They bond pretty closely there. They come back and they have a lot of shared experiences with students who went before them and who are following after them. Currently, 6 of 8 of our juniors are abroad, which makes sort of an odd dynamic in our department where we have a number of seniors finishing their theses. Our junior class is pretty much decimated, and then we have a number of sophomore and first-year students. And the result of this is it ends up, instead of creating a problem where we sort of have a gap, which is what I was expecting, we pretty much have, this is the place where our sophomore students really step up and take a leadership role in the department because of the gap from the juniors. Next slide. All right, so our student group. Our student group is very informal. We have no formal group. There is no formal name. There is no funds associated with it. And it's pretty much run by our student liaisons. And at Pomona College, each department elects 2 students to act as liaisons between the faculty and students, primarily to handle any conflict that might arise where the students might want to talk to the faculty, but do it so anonymously. The majority of the activity of our student liaisons is actually social. We do We have a lot of our student activities are run by our student liaisons. We typically have 2 to 3 liaisons a year. They're pretty much usually sophomores and juniors. We try to have the seniors already cycle out by that point. And so what I want to do is talk about some of the activities that this informal student group does. Next, please. So the activities that are initiated by the department or by the faculty are, we've got 2 regular things. We've got a weekly social, which we call Liquidus. I'll get more to that later. We have an annual department field trip, which is again initiated by the department. And then we have some one-off events that take place usually in faculty homes, various meals. We've had baking contests. I teach cheese making sometimes. We've had ping pong tournaments, things like that, again, just to try to keep that social aspect in our department alive. Next. The activities that are initiated by the students are all one-off events. They're not regular things, but they're typically mineral collecting trips, various local mines, the Gemorama in Searles Lake. We've had students run barbecues. These are on-campus barbecues. There's barbecue pits on campus. And to celebrate students' post-thesis submission, we have a department barbecue that the students initiate and run. And every year there's usually fall break and spring break trips. These are run by geology students but through the outdoor club, so it's not just geology students participating. Next, please. All right, so Liquidus. This is our weekly social, and this is a really key component to our student group activities and building the sense of community in our department. It's an informal gathering. It's run by the student liaisons. When I say run by the student liaisons, I mean they pick up the snacks, although the department pays for it. They pick up the snacks, and usually they offer some kind of fun themed activity. I've got just a couple pictures here from some recent holidays. The pumpkin carving was a big hit. The Bring a Green Rock for St. Patrick's Day was pretty fun. Everything they were eating was green. Anyway, but this is a social thing. Most of our majors come. A lot of non-majors come. Our geology students try to bring students from the intro classes or the intermediate level classes, people who have not been participating. They really encourage them to come along. The snacks are paid for by the department. It costs about $30 a week. And the timing is usually following some large intermediate level lab course. So we can have students go down to the lab course and try to invite people to come on up and join us. It's a real positive, happy group, and everybody's invited and encouraged to come to Liquidus. You don't need to be a geology major. Next. Our annual department field trip is another one of these regularly recurring community building events. It happens in the fall semester about 2 to 3 weeks in. It's a 2-night trip, so it's just a very short trip. It's kind of a long weekend. And the emphasis is on bonding plus some geology. So the emphasis really is on getting back together and after the summer and getting to know each other. With guidance, the students determine the location and handle the logistics, the camping, etc. Food is paid for through the student meal cards, so that's for lunch and dinner. And then other costs like the vehicles, the additional food, camping expenses, etc. are picked up by the geology department. The equipment is provided by either the geology department or the outdoor club or students if they have it. And currently, Pomona College provides the geology department with $1,000 a year to pay for this, although that's being phased out. We're working on building an endowed account, and the understanding from the college is that this is going to be phased out with time, that we'll be picking it up ourselves. Next. Right, so we also have an Alumni Speaker Series where once a year in early February we have a 2-day event, formal dinner, a talk one evening, a talk the next day. I didn't think of this as a community building event, but our student liaisons, when I met with them, said this was actually a really big part of feeling like they were part of the community. All the students that I talked to said that when they get the invitation in the mail, I put the invitation down there on the bottom, but when they get the invitation in the mail, it really makes them feel like they're accepted to be part of this community. And dressing up on a Wednesday night when all their other friends are not also makes them feel part of a special group. The picture on the bottom there is the picture of our students from this year's alumni event, and the computer's there to show the students, some of the students in New Zealand who Skyped in to be part of this event as well. Next, please. So in conclusion, I asked our students why they felt that the students in our department were so close. We don't have any formal student groups. We don't, but we really have a very close department, very close-knit department, and I asked them why they thought it was so close. The majority of them said they felt it was just a really welcoming environment. Being invited as a first or a second year student to come to Liquidus was a really wonderful, welcoming environment, and going up with somebody that they knew, like their TA or somebody else from the class, helped them blend into this group. So Liquidus was a big deal. The department field trip, there were several students who were saying that joining the department field trip early on was a really good bonding experience again. But the big thing that came back is that they just work and study together. They hang out together in the department, and this is because we have they have access to the rooms in the department, the labs, classrooms, and our computer room 24/7. They work together, and whether they're working on geology or not, they tend to hang out together in the computer room, this big picture at the bottom, because not only do they have access to computers, but they're also comfortable couches, they're big tables to work on, and they know all their friends are going to be working there. And so they find it a really, just working together is really helping them bond together. Next slide. So I asked them, how does our student activities help build community? They said it's a welcoming and inclusive department. They felt that the student group tended to be collaborative and not competitive. That tends to be a Pomona trait in general, not geology only. They learn a lot from each other. They make connections and plans. For example, the fall break, spring break trips. As a group, they travel and stay together at AGU and GSA, any conferences they go to, and they found that for the students who do not go to internships elsewhere during the summer, if they stay on campus and work with the faculty, they find that they've got even closer bonding, they're even more social. They actually have time to go to a movie. So I think, oh, next please. And then recruiting. So how do we recruit students into our group, into our social group? Primarily through the Liquidus Weekly Social. Student TAs, we don't have graduate students, so we have undergraduates TAing all of our classes. They reach out to the underclassmen. We also have a number of students who are leaders of outdoor club activities, and that's bringing geology and thinking about geology to other groups. And the orientation adventures for the first year students. And again, we have a lot of our geology students who are leaders on the orientation adventure trips, which help encourage first year students to come and take geology classes. And I believe that's it from me.
Okay. Well, I see William & Mary Geology on the screen. This is Chuck Bailey, and this is going to be my part. And I think you're going to find that I echo many of the things that Linda said. And we also have, I think, a great intellectual community in the geology department at William & Mary. And it almost has a life of its own now, which is good for sustainability, if you will. But then on the backside of this, I think that because we do so many things, the student organizations, and we do have two, play a less significant role than they might have if we weren't involved in so many ways with the students. So this opening picture here is from a department field trip in the Virginia Piedmont, where we took about 45 people down the river to really think about sort of stream processes as well as bedrock processes, and it was quite an event. Could I have the next slide, Chris? Okay, great. So let me give you a sense of what William & Mary is. We are a state-supported university in Williamsburg, Virginia. So we lie firmly on the Virginia or Atlantic coastal plain, and many of our buildings are made of bricks. We don't have rocks in Williamsburg, but we do have lots of bricks created from digging up the clay and the sand that sort of underlies us. But we have about 6,200 undergraduates, and that's been creeping up over the years. But William & Mary is a curious university in the sense that it's got a mixed audience. There are some programs where you can get a terminal degree, a PhD, law degrees, and then there are other departments, such as geology, where we're undergraduate only. And I think that leads to sort of some challenges and then are also benefits. And then the other thing I'd sort of say here is that William & Mary is a fairly competitive place to get into, but there's this dynamic between out-of-state students and then in-state students. Our ratio from in-state to out-of-state is 65 in-state to 35 out-of-state. So I think we have a slightly different audience as far as who actually is there enrolled at William & Mary than they have at Pomona. Next slide. Okay, so in the geology department, we have 6 tenure-track faculty and 1 NTE, and in William Mary speak, that is non-tenure eligible faculty. And this faculty member is really the director of our laboratories as well as our sort of outreach program. And we're the smallest science department by a long shot on William Mary's campus. So we only offer a Bachelor's of Science degree. But typically, we graduate between 20 and 30 students per year. So you can see a happy graduating class in the background there, maybe some even happier faculty in the foreground of this picture. And we do well in the sense that we think that both genders are well represented in geology. About 40% of our students will head off to grad school in the earth sciences. But William Mary prides itself on being a liberal arts place, and I'm excited because a lot of our students don't go on to do geology. You know, they go to professional schools, they do things like law, government. Many of them circle back and come to teaching in one way, shape, and form. So we're certainly training lots of students to go on in the earth sciences, but many of them do other things. So if I could have the next slide. When I think about why we have what I think is a special community in geology at William Mary, I think it really comes to what the faculty deliver in the classroom. I think that's really where it starts. And at William Mary, we are considered to do a lot of teaching. Typically, we sort of have a throughput at the 100 or introductory level of 350 to 500 students in any given semester. And so you can see in the picture in the upper right-hand corner, some of these are relatively large classes. I taught a 200-person Intro to the Earth's Environmental Systems course last fall. But it's in those classes that we recruit the students who go on and then really become part of the geology community. And then there are other ways I think that we are growing a community at William Mary. One of the things that William Mary requires is that every sort of entering first-year student take a freshman seminar. And their classes that are 15 and smaller. And we make sure that we always offer 1 per semester. And the draw that we get for students that continue in geology out of those is really quite high. We also are keen to make sure we're doing things in some of the interdisciplinary programs at William Mary. So environmental science is one that many of the geology faculty actually contribute to. And I think it goes both ways. We are pulling environmentally interested students into geology through that. Things like senior research advising. All of our students do research. Talk a little bit more about that. And then, you know, in the end, the faculty that are there really like teaching, and I think that is the thing that sort of starts it all off. So, if I could have the next slide. Okay, the other thing that I think lends itself to community is the fact that we worked quite hard to make sure that we have a lot of undergraduate research opportunities. And we've done that by sort of codifying it in the sense that all William Mary geology majors complete a senior thesis. And the idea is that this is an independent project that they really start the spring of their junior year, and then they take through to the end. And with most projects, there's a field component. You can see people with a gravimeter on a frozen lake in Utah. You can see people in the geochemistry lab back in Williamsburg. And then at the bottom of the image, some of the sort of downstream output for this. We, you know, spend a lot of money trying to make sure we get our students to go to meetings. So you can see part of my research team from a year ago presenting their poster at a Geological Society of America meeting. In fact, that's where I am right now. Don't hate me because I'm in Puerto Rico, but I am. We just went to the Southeast GSA meeting, and there was a whole bevy of William Mary students here. And then, you know, some of that research actually ends up in the peer-reviewed literature. So that, I think, is one of the things that makes a very close department. Now, I didn't include this in a slide, but the 2 sort of formal groups that we have at William Mary, there's a geology club, which is very informal. They sort of, some years they do things, other years they don't. And then there is a Geology Honor Society, SGE. And I think that's sort of a similar kind of thing, that the faculty really are hands-off with that. And if the students are gung-ho, they do things. But I also think that we keep them pretty busy with all the other things that we're doing, so that community is there without having these auxiliary organizations really being what feeds it. Next slide, please. So I think what makes the intellectual community what it is, a lot of it comes back to a lot of the experiences that we do that are out of the classroom. And field experiences are pretty much at the top of my list. Every semester we run a department field trip, and they can range from a 2-night trip, somewhat like they do at Pomona, to even day trips. A weekend ago we had our department spring field trip, which was actually led by seniors, and they were taking people to some of the outcrops and study locations that they've worked on. The top picture there is a scene from the eastern shore of Virginia, where we took boats and motored out to Virginia's barrier islands and got to look at a lot of the processes right there in the coastal zone. The lower left-hand corner is a class field trip to a Mesozoic basin, and the students are standing next to some Triassic dinosaur tracks, which are what are wetted there. And then in the lower right-hand corner, we have a field course that pretty well goes every year. And last year we were in the Southwest, about 27 students with us for 3.5 weeks. So really, these come in a lot of different forms, from class trips to an intended department trip where we have seniors to fresh people, and we want it to be as much social as it is geological. Could I have the next slide? Okay, so the other thing that we have done is we have a Geology Brownback Seminar that takes place pretty well every Friday in the department. And here's a scene from earlier this semester. And Nancy is holding forth at the front of this classroom, and she's talking about her senior research. But this is sort of a come one, come all event. It happens, and it's a voluntary thing. So if you look out at the students in the audience, they're all there, and they're all there sort of on their lunchtime, and they're there because they want to be. And this is one of those things, we've been doing it since 1996, and it's now a tradition. People really want to be able to present their research. And, we fill up a room, 20, 30 people, no problem. And as I said, it's sort of got the life of its own. The faculty will sort of help schedule and do all that, but it is in some ways student-driven, but it's not associated with anything formally. Next slide. Oh, I thought there was one other one that was lurking in here. Did we jump over one, perhaps?
No, that was what I had.
Oh dear. Well, that's unfortunate, but it's not going to be too damning. What I was going to show was another picture I had in here talking about some of the outreach that we do. And we have a Geology on Wheels program. And so there were some photos of students that actually are in local elementary schools. And I think that's, one, a good way to get students to sort of teach some of the material they've learned themselves. And then they are really a pretty nice community of people because they're excited to go do this, to get into the classroom, very enthusiastic. And that's one of the things that our non-tenure eligible faculty member, that's part of her job, is to help facilitate the outreach component like that. The other side of that slide was going to show you a little bit about the thing that's pretty exciting. We've created a WM Geo Movies YouTube channel. And in this world where smartphones can take videos of almost anything, we've been trying to cobble together a whole series of videos of actually what we do, both in the lab and the classroom. So you can go to WM Geo Movies and jack up our sort of number of view counts. But to me, that's this dynamic thing. The students are really excited about that because they are, keen and capable on making these kinds of, this kind of media. So that, to me, is another thing that brings it together. So what we're on right now is the last slide that I had in there. And what I wanted to sort of close with is that all of the things that we do that I think make us an intellectual community cost money. They are not necessarily cheap, and then they also cost faculty time. So how does one sort of sustain that and fund that? So on the funding part, one of the things I would say is that we have been willing to plow some of our overhead recovery money that we get from research grants back into this. And we do that because we think this is part of what makes a department dynamic, gets students into doing the research. So that's one piece. The other piece is that we've been very successful, I think, with our alums, going back to them. So this is a photograph from a field course to Big Bend in southwest Texas. And we have now alumni support that really subsidizes that trip in a very big way, with the idea we don't want any student not to be able to go on this trip. So we can provide scholarships. We have tried to keep the trip cost down quite low. And we've made a conscientious effort to go to our alums and say, this is what we think is very valuable, and will you support us in this? The state of Virginia is not necessarily going to support something like that. They would try to sort of charge students an arm and a leg to do these experiences. But if you're going to make them happen, you've got to sort of have the funding source. So that's one piece. And then the other part of it is I think that over the long term, you've got to have faculty willing to do this for the better part of their career. And I'm in a department where we're mostly all now mid-career faculty with one or two that are just coming to sort of being tenured. And so far, so good. We've worked for the last 15, 16 years, and I think we have been able to sustain it. And maybe if we have this webinar in another 10 years, we'll be able to sort of proudly say, yeah, we did it for 25. And there are moments where that seems difficult because as things change, families, and we get older, do you still want to spend every weekend in the field one way or the other? But I think part of that coming from the faculty has then led to this sort of payoff with the students picking it up and running with it. So that's my perspective from William & Mary, and I hope some of this might have been useful.
Okay, thank you. We do have a couple questions. One, Linda, came in during your presentation, actually. Are your students on campus? Do they live on campus?
Okay, yes. So we are a residential college. All of our students live on campus. Most of our students are not from California. I think probably about 20% of our students are from California. But yes, all our students live on campus.
Okay. Yeah, question for both of you. I think you sort of alluded to it, Chuck, that you have clearly broad buy-in by the faculty to the engagement of the students sort of in this social manner. So Linda, how do you feel as far as your colleagues as a whole? Does everyone buy into this? Is it a group effort by everyone in your department?
Very much so. The 4 faculty, and we also, just listening to Chuck's presentation, we also have a very research active department with our students. Similar to William & Mary, we require a senior thesis, but we also have a lot of research components to our classes. So individual classes will have research projects as a significant component, so our students get a lot of time working together in the lab, and all our faculty buy into this, support this, are really on board with this. Field trips are a little harder because of young families and other conflicts, but all of our faculty agree in the importance of this and support it to the degree they can.
Okay. I couldn't help but notice one thing in both of your guys' slides was in the more what I call social, the things that weren't associated obviously with a class, that the gender equity wasn't quite there. It was definitely, it looked like there was a lot more females. That could have been just how the photos were taken, or do you find that there's a gender variance as far as the level of extracurricular social engagement by your students?
Chuck, you want to start off?
Sure, I can start off with that. I think that we feel like it's generally pretty balanced, that it's rare to sort of notice, oh, it's all one way or all another. But what I would say I notice is that there are gender differences that manifest themselves in who does what research, and that may be attributed to, we oftentimes have many women who are working in the realm of sort of paleoecology, paleobiology. Our paleobiologist is a woman, and so I think there's some natural ties that way. But when it comes to sort of going to the field, going to do the outreach stuff, it seems to me that the guys and the girls are all pretty excited about it, and it doesn't break itself out that way. But there is a component to that I see, not all the time, but that comes down to sort of research and maybe who your mentor ends up being.
Mm-hmm.
And in our department, it's really a problem of statistics of small numbers. Right now, we have a large component of a larger percentage of women in our department than at other times. There are some times that we have predominantly men. Over the last 10 years, we've had slightly more than 50% women graduating. In terms of who's participating, again, we have predominantly women in our department right now. What we find, or this is anecdotal, but what I've observed is that during the times when we have predominantly men in the department, it's harder to get the women to come in and join. When there's a critical mass of women in the department, that's when we start building them up again. Right now we have so many women in the department, you'd think we'd have a question about the critical mass of men, but we're not having a problem getting the men to come and join in on these social and extra activities.
Okay.
So, but for us, like I said, it's a statistics of small numbers thing. So when we're talking about 10 students and 8 of them happen to be women this year, then we see a lot more women.
Right. So do either of you, other than obviously your student research being presented at the conferences and stuff, do you have any other more formal connections with the society, student groups, or any other kinds of connections with the geoscience societies on campus?
We don't at William & Mary, and that actually was a conscientious decision by the faculty. We just sort of felt like it was something else to do, and it wasn't vital to sort of the mission of the department. So someone will help advise the Student Honor Society, but there's no sort of dictate that, well, you guys should do this or not do that. And my experience has been that it sort of rises and falls depending on sort of who wants to be involved in it. And so some years it's almost invisible, and then it will sort of come back. And as a faculty, I think we sort of said, you know, we can devote our time in better ways or other ways, and have sort of let it be what it is in that capacity. I certainly think we are, you know, do our best to get our students to, you know, become members of AGU and GSA, and you know, for probably 2/3 of our students, they are going to one of those meetings at some point during their career. And to me, that's really critical, because they get to all of a sudden see this world that is bigger than just William & Mary. I mean, we may have 25 majors in a given year, and you may see a lot of the juniors and seniors, but it's really exciting to end up in San Francisco at a meeting and see thousands and thousands of other people who are sort of interested in the earth and the space and the atmosphere around us. So that is a component I think we're pretty proactive about.
Okay.
And at Pomona, during their junior year, we buy a membership for each student, each of our majors, so they can join AGU or GSA or the Mineralogical Society of America, whatever it is they're interested in. So we buy 1-year membership for them with the idea that it will help promote their thinking about attending these different meetings, just looking at the world around them. Also, being close to San Francisco, we're about a 4.5, 5-hour drive. Well, it depends on how you drive. Anyway, we're driving distance to San Francisco, and so a number of our students go to AGU, whether they're presenting or not. And it's really exciting when sophomores go, and then they see what's going on, and they carry it through, and they bring it in their junior year and their senior year. And so we get students who go multiple years because it's becoming part of the community, part of the culture here.
What are some unique challenges and advantages that you guys see? You both have relatively small departments, say, compared to like a University of Texas or something like that. What do you see as some of the advantages and disadvantages in engaging your student community, because of your size?
Well, for us, we are very small, and some of the advantages are when something exciting is happening. We've had a recent earthquake. There's a scarp nearby, or we're having a heavy rain event, so the flooding is happening. We can all hop in our vehicles and drive on over. We've got a Suburban here for the department, and we can borrow another one, and it's easy to get us all just up and going. Some of the disadvantages are we have 4 faculty members, and depending, if someone's on sabbatical, if someone's out with a small child, there's a lot of pressure for each of us to step up and carry a lot because there's only 4 of us.
Yep, I think that's certainly one of the things that I would say is a challenge on our side at William & Mary. I mean, we really have 6 or 7 faculty. We have a finite set of expertise, but in the last 10 years, we've tried to grow sort of the breadth of courses. So I now teach in essence, a weather and climate class, and it's offered as a 2nd-level course. I enjoy doing it. I probably wouldn't do it if I did not take some value out of it. But in some ways, I think that takes me away from my scholarship, and I'm not really trained as a meteorologist. So it would be great if we were bigger in that capacity. I think we could offer broader things without having people to sort of jump a little bit outside their comfort zone. But there was a demand for that. I think it pays off, and we now have students that are going on to do more than just sort of hard rock geology. And so that sort of seems like the right thing to do. So that's one of the challenges that concerns us with being small. I think one of the benefits we get at William & Mary, being the smallest science department, we oftentimes can say, yeah, we really do have this community feel. We have the sense that other bigger departments, the pre-meds and the biology, pre-meds and chemistry, they don't have that same sort of esprit de corps that we have. And I think that brings students to us sometimes because they're seeking something that's very different from what they might get in a department where they have 30 faculty.
Where, question from Susan Webb, where do most of your students end up working after they graduate?
So at William & Mary, we have a large number who within the first year or 2 or 3 end up going to grad school. And I think that by and large, most of them end up with master's degrees. And from there, they either end up in consulting or energy, or they may, turn around and become a teacher. I would bet it's 10 to 15% who sort of are ending up sort of like academics that we are, and certainly there are students at the very beginning, first 5 years out, I think, who ask a lot of questions about what they really want to do. I think if we had a sort of an entrance and an exit interview at William & Mary about this stuff, very few students arrive knowing that they want to do geology or earth science stuff, and some of them end up doing it, I think, because they're captivating teachers and they're cool peers to be around. And so that they spend some time thinking, well, did I do this because I want to make a career out of it, or did I do it because this was what was really intriguing during that interval of my life?
And it's very similar at Pomona. We have very similar ratios in terms of who ends up going to grad school and continuing on. But we also have a lot of students who major in geology because they enjoy it, but then continue on and go to law school. They go to med school. We have a student who's taken over his parents' vineyard. A lot of our students go on and go into education. There's a lot of outreach. A number of students have gone into various landscaping type enterprises, but the majority of our students end up going to grad school and getting at least a master's. Probably a quarter of them get PhDs.
Okay. That's interesting. Of course, probably always one of the biggest questions for departments. So for either of your schools, do faculty get any credit towards tenure promotion for the activities related to promoting student groups and student community?
Yeah, that's the one that is interesting. I think that at William & Mary, the answer would be yes and no. And I think that the answer would be yes in the fact that for a junior faculty, if they come in and they do this and they sort of join the team, if you will, I'm going to make sure as chair that when I put their promotion package or their tenure packet forward, that is really emblazoned front and center with all of the other things that they do. And so we sort of would say we would want to hire faculty who will be willing to do that, and then make sure we really frame that very nicely with their promotion and tenure packet, because I don't think it happens everywhere at William & Mary, and there are some departments that it is not. So I think in some ways that's where the department leadership has to try to make the case for how special this is, so it sort of sits in at that level. But I think that if you don't highlight that, that very clearly could get sort of swept under the rug, or someone could say, oh, well, surely everybody does that at a place like William & Mary. And I would say that's not quite true, but I think it's, the burden is on me as chair to make sure that I can present that case for junior faculty as to why that is one of the critical things to being successful as an academic in our institution.
And I wholly agree with Chuck. It is really important that when I was chair and we had a faculty member going through tenure, we needed to make sure that the college recognized the value of this. When you ask if they get credit, the answer is yes, but with reminders that you really need the senior faculty to remind the college of the importance of this, the value of this, and how it really is a true key element to the department. And so, because it's unlike any other department on campus, no other department has activities like this, has field trips, things, the energy and the time involved in it. And so we need to, every time we have a faculty member come up for tenure or promotion, we need to remind the administration of the value of it. But I think, yes, we do get credit for it.
Interesting. Excellent question from Joel Moore. So let me read this to you guys. Do you know of any research that discusses the importance of common meeting spaces? I'm in a similarly small department without much space, and it'd be great to have some data in arguing for a student gathering space.
Joel, that's an excellent question, and I do not. I know that when we were in our old building, we were in a same thing, small department, but there was no common space, and our student community was not nearly as strong as it is now. I do not know of any research, and I would love to learn about it.
I don't either. I mean, so my examples are anecdotal, but we did a similar thing in our department. We had what was in essence a teaching lab that we turned into sort of the computer lab student room, and with some exceptions, we really turned it over to the students, and that's where they are. If you're there at the right time of night, typically, it can be absolutely jam-packed, and there was no common place for them to be prior to that. And so I think that as far as that group mentality, the space can make a big difference.
And I'll just add, I mean, obviously it's not a small department, but, you know, the Jackson School there at the University of Texas, obviously, you know, they have a spectacular student meeting space, but, you know, that actually, they ended up crafting that. They had similar fights with the university, apparently, to get that space, and it wasn't really driven by, you know, the funding that they had internal to their department. So might be worth inquiring down with the Jackson School as well and how they've done it. And they've turned it not just into a meeting space, but a learning space as well. So it's pretty impressive situation that they just opened up down there too.
I was going to add, in our building that we have now, we have a new building. It's 5 years old, and we actually have two common spaces for the students. One is that computer lab that I showed you, and another is a room that we put aside in our design specifically for student use. And for the most part, the students don't use it because it doesn't have computers in it. So they've ended up moving their comfy couches out of the student room into our computing space. So if you're looking at building a common space for studying and students to hang out, make sure they have access to computers. That would be my suggestion.
Interesting. Are there any other questions from the audience? You can either type them or raise your hand and I can mute you. Give it a second here. Question is for you, Linda. Where in South Africa do your students go when they're there?
Oh, goodness. They're in Cape Town, but I don't remember what the program is. It's more of an environmental program rather than a straight geology.